Well, Tom, I'm so excited because this has been something we've been talking about for a while, and something we've been wanting to do together. We've been wanting to work together for how long now?
Years.
Like on
Like,
it, well, especially on this, like on the podcast, but on because we've worked together on other projects, but on the podcast specifically, like there's just some things that we need to talk about, and
yeah.
we need, like, I know our clients like want to hear from us, and
hmm
they're only going to come out when we're just like having a discussion about it. And I think this is a
Yeah.
perfect way to do it. But this is Covert Conversion, the podcast, and where we talk about full spectrum influence, all the types of influence from self, team, and campaign level regulation, communication, and relentlessly focusing on the objective. That's kind of the framework that I use with unconventional influence. But we'll get into that. We'll get into a little bit about the projects you're working on. But we're here really because we wanted to talk to specifically the audience. And you're going to hear Ash, my dog, here in the background. But we really wanted to address some of the issues, topics, and concerns that were important for professionals and experts that are into the topics of influence, of management, of personal optimization, but also those that are looking to be leaders in their own right and independently as coaches, as professionals who want to impact the world on their own stage, as opposed to working for a firm or a company or a business, doing their own thing and allowing them to be independent. That's really kind of the tools that that I help these coaches within Narrative Fusion Cell, is kind of the workshop that we take them through. And I know you're launching something new with Measured Risk. Tell us about that.
So yeah, thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it. And we have been talking about this for like years. I mean, probably, I don't know, like three, maybe, I guess, is when we started down the path together. I'm super
Yeah.
proud of you, man, for getting your business going and for launching this podcast. I actually think that a lot of people are going to be really interested in what you have to say. You bring such a unique background to this entire, I guess you could say, approach to leadership, to marketing, to sales, to business, to evolution, growth, all those pieces. Rarely do you find, and this is one of the things, as you know, I love working with soft community folks. I've mentored folks from the Honor Foundation, which you can talk about. You've been through, but I always think that your background's really unique, and I want to make sure that everybody kind of learns how that plays into business, because a lot of people don't know that folks with a special forces background are those are they're really good fits for the business world. There's a lot of carryover in terms of attributes and personality and just general qualities, I guess you could say, that you bring to the business world. So I'm a huge fan of that background. I think that with what you're doing and how you translate that into helping leaders become more successful is really, really cool. So I'm stoked to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're partners in this, so
Yep.
this
Yep.
is this is going to be an exciting adventure for both of us. We're excited to really get
Yep.
it out there and see if we can help people with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So my background is, just a lot of years in the business world, really. I mean, the business world being technology. Started out of college, pretty young age, and just have gone through the paces. I was fortunate enough to be in a sector called, which is now cybersecurity, but I started out in, it used to be called information security. And, at that period of time, it was around the year 2000. There really wasn't, there wasn't a density, I guess you could say, of folks in this industry. So it was really unique to get in early and learn about it. And then eventually go through the paces, work with different folks in the industry, learn just a tremendous amount. But being in an industry where you can help people, I mean, that's awesome when you can wake up and be like, hey, we actually have something that is going to help make something better. That's a really rewarding feeling, I think. So for me, I've been blessed to go through life and build a career in this industry and do it for the last 20 some plus years and really enjoy it. I think that working with folks like yourself as we, go down the path of how do we develop out not just organizations and businesses. How do we create solutions for the market, but also how do you help organizations evolve and become more dynamic, leaders evolve and become more dynamic, more effective. And so, yeah, I'm really really excited to be with you on this journey. I think that entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. A lot of people, venture it. Well, I mean, some people venture it, depending on the life situation. But for me, it's been an amazing experience. It's been challenging, probably the most difficult thing that I've ever done. But at the same time, it really teaches you not just about what's the kind of the art of the possible, but it teaches you a lot about yourself, which is really, really a fascinating way to learn about yourself. You go through a lot of successes and failures, and things like that. So yeah, let's dig into it. And by the way, your background there, I think it's so cool. We have to kind of point that out and maybe mention what those are behind you. But we'll get into the stories a bit. But I think that for the purposes of the discussion today, how can, the way I kind of look at this is how can influence, how can you use these various different, I guess you could say, ways of looking at the world, whether they're techniques or approaches, to amplify, sharpen, become more successful at whatever it is you do. And it's not just business, it's obviously life.
Yeah, and I think thanks for all that. And it's important to point out that, and I'll show a diagram here for those that are watching. For those that are listening, I'll go ahead and describe it. Let me share my screen. Who are those guys? So this is a model I came up with. It came from, hold on real quick. I gotta get this out of the way. So this is a model I came up with. It came from an article written by a scholar on Special Operations Forces, SOF, and unconventional warfare. His name's David Kilcullen. He wrote an article, I think it was in the Scandinavian War Journal, I believe is what it was called, but it was called The Evolution of Unconventional Warfare. And unconventional warfare is what we use within special operations, and it's a bottom-up, working by, with, and through others to accomplish large-scale missions with small, highly trained teams. And whether it be in the Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, what have you, we all work together in SOF to be able to utilize this unconventional warfare technique and strategy to be able to create large-scale change. And so David Kilcullen wrote this article about this evolution, how it's no longer like just a linear bottom-up approach, but instead with this highly connected and networked world, it's now kind of back and forth, left and right. It's within the boundaries of detection and undetection. And so he came up with a model that had these thresholds and these operational factors. And I've kind of combined it with influence and what, as us as leaders, what we need to focus on to be able to diminish the amount of resistance we get when we're influencing and working to kind of help other people take action, right? Minimizing the resistance and being able to allow them to make their own decisions, but in a guided and safe and decisive manner. And so this model is kind of a takeoff Kilcullen's, but it's its own thing. And I call it the attribution threshold model, using operational markers to understand where you're at within the influence spectrum. And you'll see on the left-hand side, we've got the thresholds of detection, attribution, and response. On the right-hand side, you see the levels of influence with clandestine, covert, ambiguous, and overt. And let me just say, like, the reason we call the podcast Covert Control is because it goes back to nobody likes to be sold. Everyone likes to buy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's also the same thing. You could say it a different way. Nobody likes to be told what to do. Everyone likes to make their own decisions. Nobody likes to be taught. Everyone likes to discover and find out. And so the best type of influence is the type of influence that kind of goes undetected. And it's always for and in behalf of the person or people that you're trying to influence. If you're not in a war type scenario, right, we're not trying to get bad guys with these tools, then you're trying to practice the golden rule of do unto others as you would like to have done unto you, right? And so we're always looking at it as leadership, as getting people to leave their comfort zones, number one. Number two, they like their comfort zones, and yet they're unhappy in their comfort zones. They're unhappily happy in their comfort zones, and they will fight you like crazy to stay in their comfort zones. And so the idea is to help invite them outside their comfort zone, to get them to act with kind of without them knowing it. So that you can kind of, so that they do it with less resistance. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. Yeah. I think it's, it's, first of all, it's fascinating. And I think for everybody listening, when you kind of give a little bit of background of how this model can be applied and how it has been applied, certainly from a background of the soft community and some of the activities in the past that can be spoken about. But I think that also the application of that to today and outside of kind of a military construct, but from a business world perspective, when we think about, covert influence, that's the area that sticks out right here, obviously, right, in a lot of ways. And I want to get your perspective on that area quite a bit in terms of philosophy and history. What do we mean by that, and how do you actually how do you articulate that to move, either a person or an organization or a mission towards the objectives?
Awesome. Great question. And it, just to kind of flesh this out visually. So for those of you listening, it's the model is a triangle, and on the left you have it's split up into 4 pieces. Left, you have detection threshold, attribution threshold, response threshold. Those are the kind of 3 sections as you move up to the top. On the right, on the very base, under detection, you have clandestine influence. This is where the operation and the source of the influence is unknown. And there we're working with psychology, physiology, things that are like your thoughts are your thoughts. If you're hungry, you're hungry. You're hot, you're cold, you're cold. Those things are just automatic, right? Like we don't affect those things within ourselves if we're not aware of them, and they just go, right? And so that's if there's any influence happening there, it's of clandestine nature. The operation, what's going on and who's doing it is completely unknown. But once we pass the detection threshold, we move into history and philosophy. So just to explain that, that's like nature nurture. It's like your experiences of the past, how you see them, how you see yourself in them, and then the beliefs and values that you've created as a result of that, like your philosophy, your set of rules, whether it's spoken or unspoken. Like these are the things that operate kind of coherently, a little bit incoherently, but at the level of history and philosophy, if we're influencing somebody at that level, this is covert. The detection is there. We can tell that, okay, this person is talking to me about my experiences, how it's affected me, some of my beliefs and values, but I don't know that they're trying to influence me. It's just kind of source unknown, right? Like we're just having a conversation. So if we're influencing somebody at that level, we're working with that history philosophy in a way that gets them to go have ahas, like at the identity level, like, oh yeah, like I've seen myself as this type of person, but you've shed some light on this. I now see myself as, you're right, I am that kind of person. And so now I'm going to do it this way. And so now we've kind of led them in a covert manner. And once we pass up above that, the attribution threshold, we move into what's called the ambiguous influence sphere, where it's an unproven suspicion. In other words, like, I know something's happening, and I know you're working with me here in a way that's making me see things in a different light, but I'm not 100% sure that, like, you're trying to change me, right? I'm aware there's a level of awareness, but I'm not sure that you're trying to like get me to do anything. It's just kind of an ambiguous influence. And at that level, like we're having a conversation and you know that maybe I'm coaching you to see things in a different way, but you don't really know that I'm getting you to try to do anything in particular. Right. And so we're working with levels of awareness here. And then up above that is the response threshold. And once we move past the response threshold, we meet more resistance. And this is over influence, where it requires kind of a positional level of leadership and maybe a level of forced manipulation. So this is where we don't want to be, because here we're going to meet resistance. Here we're going to meet somebody's own free will, that now they go, hey, I'm comfortable where I'm at. You're trying to get me to buy something, or you're trying to get me to do something, and I don't want to do it. Like, I like where I'm at. And so that's kind of a level, if you're good at what you do, that's a level of almost irresponsibility. Like, you've now kind of blown it. Like, you're outside the threshold of influence, and now you're into the sphere of like force, right? Where below force is power. Now we're into force, and it's just now you're up against friction and resistance.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then you can think about this also. I've spent a lot of years in sales, and have a lot of formal enterprise training in sales. And it's interesting because you can actually take a lot of what this chart describes and map it to the way, some of the sales training and how you approach a client, or how you go through the process of ultimately, quote, getting to a yes. And it's interesting, to your point. I mean, force doesn't work. It never has.
Right.
It turns people off. And so, to your point of sitting kind of in that influence area, I guess you could say, whether it's covert influence and ambiguous influence, let's talk about that. I'm curious, from your perspective, because first of all, this is think of it from this perspective. Salespeople in organizations are trained one way. There is overlap here in some respect, but this is a deeper, more intellectual model by far than the traditional sales training, enterprise sales training that's out in the world. So from your perspective, the crossover into the marketing world, let's say we're, one of you is a CEO of a Fortune 500 organization, or even a mid-size or small organization, and you're looking to go to market, and you're creating incremental value, or you've got new solutions to release and launch. What, tie that to covert influence. I'll just tee it off a bit. I think of it as also brand, and we'll get back to that, because that's another part of this. But what are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So for marketing, for my clients, what we do usually when I'm working with somebody, like I worked with a few authors, right? And they work in psychology. One sports psych, the other is more was military, classically trained psychologist, behavioral expert, and interrogation and interviewer expert. And they had both written books and had I had a bunch of great workout already. But the idea was like, how do we connect and make a match with the founder of the audience, with the audience and the offer and the messaging, and make it all just click, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it resonates. And so the idea here was how to work within that level of covert control, how to make the connection from the founder and the expert and their services and products, and the market and their deepest needs and desires and wants, and be able to bring them to that. And we work with something called, we work with a couple of things. One of them is we do a deep dive into values and vulnerabilities. Mm-hmm. And with the values, it's kind of another way of looking at like going towards pleasure and away from pain. Well, people value what they value, so they want to go towards what they value and resonate with what they value at a deeper level. But they will see their vulnerabilities if you show them to them in the right way, and they will move away from those, right? Because all of a sudden you're getting into a level of an identity that they don't want to see.
Mm-hmm.
and that they are afraid of. And so we get down deep and do a target audience analysis and look. It sounds boring, but it's just doing a deep dive on kind of their market and their values and vulnerabilities and what they're currently doing, their current situation. And then we build a belief chain going from current situation to the product or offering of the expert. And then in the middle, we start to build in, through that kind of deep dive into the market's values and vulnerabilities, we'll start to pull out their current beliefs, and we'll attach those beliefs to features and benefits of the offer, and do it in a way that it acts as a signpost along the journey to their desired destination. If you look at it like A versus B, like getting from point A to point B, point A is where the coach was, right? But it's where their audience currently is, to B, where their market or audience wants to be. And then we build out the belief chains, which are the signposts along the way of their beliefs attached to a unique benefit of the product or offer or service, and how that gets them closer to B as a result of following the process, or following in line with kind of those built-in beliefs. It's how we design offers, right? And we utilize those belief chains and values and benefits to be able to make the connections and lead them along the way in a covert manner.
Yeah, this is huge for when you think of digital marketing, right? How do organizations mostly reach their target audience today? I mean, email, you have social media, you have email, you have different methods, but having actually, as opposed to kind of this what I consider spray and pray methodology, having a much more focused, much more methodical approach to understanding those things that you described is really smart and could save organizations a lot of money, because you're always testing messages. Everybody knows what like A/B testing is and things like that, and so you're testing to see what works. But going into it with a more of a clear head around this type of approach, and it goes back to like knowing your ideal customer or your archetype, or what is your unique USP, unique selling proposition to that audience or to that buyer. It's really interesting, Rusty.
Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of get back and focus in on that. Yeah, like just the spray and pray method is the norm, right? It's a surfacey avatar. It's a surfacey avatar analysis, looking at kind of some of the psychographics and demographics, but it really doesn't get into like where they're at, what they believe, how that's affecting them in a negative way, how that's actually counterproductive, and what the real reframing or the real way they need to think about it is. That it's like the pro tip that only the expert would know, because they've already crossed that. They've already completed that journey. And so being able to connect all that, it works really well with somebody, like I said, who is a professional, who is an expert, that's already kind of become a master of their domain, because they also have a story. It's the hero's journey. It's the Luke Skywalker, the internal turmoil, the external Darth Vader, and kind of those dueling stories and struggles that are happening at the same time, that you're able to lace into a story, instill beliefs, lower that resistance, and plant the seeds of belief and of confidence in you as the guide along the audience, their journey, right? And it's just it's a different way to do it, but it works really well.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, you've got my brain going around all kinds of sales models that I've learned along the years, and you talk about getting a champion in an account, for instance, and getting that person to kind of align with you as they fight the good fight to go up the chain and get buy-in from the powers that be. There's a lot of that, and thinking about how to get folks to take action And a lot of times, like, I think probably this is probably with everybody, right? That's in a situation where they're trying to get an organization or get a person or a leader, whomever it may be, to make a move and do something. A lot of times, you'll be in positions where you might know you fundamentally have the answer to their solution, but getting them to being able to convey that is one thing. And there's we all run short on creativity at times, of like, outside of just saying, look, you need it. Right? Look, you need this, versus how many ways do we have to like dance to figure out that you then need it, right? And that's always a struggle. So I think that this type of approach or model can educate people on moving towards that path. I mean, I'll tell you, like, in the early days of learning to sell, I was taught, when you go into an office and look around at the office and profile the background and look at the composition of this person's life. One of the first venture pitches I was in, the investor was speaking, and I was just focused on the left bookshelf and picking out specific books where I knew that there was some kind of interesting aspect there that we could tie together. But this is more, I consider that more of like an approach, versus this is much more comprehensive at a campaign level. So let's talk about campaigns, because ultimately that's that's really what we're talking about. And whether it's campaigns, whether it's militarily, which I know, you've given me one time, you blew my mind with an example of a particular operation. And I think you should share, because it's just amazing. And let's talk about how that translates to business campaigns as well.
Yeah, no, we were just talking about this. Let me pull it up real quick. Okay, so this is called the Soros pyramid, and this is the industry standard for special operations and unconventional warfare, and it's that bottom up approach, going from a dissatisfied group of people, tribe, whatever, and being able to create an atmosphere where there's wider discontent. Moving into action, training them, recruiting others, penetrating professional, social, political organizations, moving into expansion, coordinating among resistance networks, all the way up. So that's all happening covertly into the overt, large-scale military, paramilitary actions, negotiated settlement, change of the guard, if you will, right? And this is unconventional warfare. This is the historic approach. This is not the evolved approach that David Kilcullen talked about. This is the more traditional approach. It's not outdated. It just is incomplete. And so David Kilcullen's work on kind of the evolution of unconventional warfare, instead of going bottom up, now it's back and forth, left and right, and it's staying within the boundaries of covert, what he called liminal warfare, what I call covert control, right? And so So the process I work this into with my clients is called covert conversion. We'll call it covert control too. A lot of kind of word soup there, but what it really comes down to is an approach where you do start at the base with target client research, really deep values, vulnerabilities, current situations, beliefs, and desired destinations and feelings. You find a narrative angle, the story of the founder or the coach or expert or company. Be able to create a hero's journey in fast-paced episodes that instill beliefs that resonate and connect on current situations, and guide them along the journey of conquering Darth Vader, right? Of conquering the beast. So and then as you go, you have to iterate the message, because sometimes you have it a little bit off, and so you have to change it a little bit. You have dilemmas, you have deviations, and you have to kind of just make tweaks. So you iterate on your way up to the actual change at the overt level that you wanted to, the destination you wanted to bring your audience and market to. So we use this kind of approach in building out campaigns and managing campaigns. So an example, just like you spoke about, an example of this is Operation Christmas. So this was the Colombians, the country of Colombia, beautiful place. I actually did a tour. I did a deployment there, and as a psychological operations specialist. And so went there, worked at the U.S. Embassy, and actually for a time lived with the Colombian Army and went through their Colombian PSYOP program, both as a subject matter expert and as a student. Was the first, me and my partner both went through it, and we were the first and last to ever do this. So it's kind of a cool opportunity. But we went through it. And while I was there, I learned about this operation. I didn't carry this out, didn't have a part in it, but I learned about it. It was actually carried out by Mullen Lowe Group, which is it's a worldwide advertising organization, civilian advertising group. And they worked with the Colombian military to demobilize the oldest standing guerrilla force in the world, the FARC at the time. So they launched in 2010 this campaign. And the first iteration, large scale, was called Operation Christmas. But let me show you kind of along the way how this campaign followed that initial target audience analysis, the iterations onto the actual change. So the background of this, the Colombians had the longest standing guerrilla force in the world, over 60 years, the FARC, and their wars were financed through extortion, legal mining, terrorism, human drug and gun trafficking. The cost was 5.7 million displaced people and over 220,000 deaths over many, many years, over 60 years. So how does the military save lives through this model of covert control or conversion? The goal here was to demobilize the guerrilla fighters. The Mullen Lowe Group, they were in charge of putting together the campaign. The current condition of the target audience was, after kind of talking to other former guerrillas that had demobilized and left, they realized the guerrillas, this is big. So this is one to write down. This is a value or vulnerability in one phrase. That the guerrillas they feel like they're as much prisoners of their organizations as the people they hold hostage. That is a big idea. Because from that idea, they value, so I'll tell you what they value, but their vulnerability was they felt like they were prisoners as much as the people that they were harming and taking hostage. And so if we know that, now we can work with that and find a value. So defining problem, they're remote access, they live in the jungle, we're fatigues. So how do we reach out to them? In your business, in your company, I'm sure you like your audience, it feels like they're hidden. How do you reach out to them? How do you get to them? Accessibility, right? Also, if you attempt to get them out of the jungle, the higher ups are going to kill them. So that was something. So the prototype one in this campaign was a 30-second TV spot featuring guerrilla stories. The flaw in this model, though, they used actors to hide their former guerrilla identities. And so it came across as insincere. Like the actual guerrillas, the lower level echelon fighters, because they had radios in the jungle, when they'd hear these radio spots, they're like, that's not us. We know that's not us. They're trying to manipulate us. So they overreached and hit beyond that at that level of response. They hit past that response threshold, and they met resistance, right? Because they didn't keep it within that covert control, the ambiguous and covert influence spheres. So they had minimal success. So in your home, at work, in your job, right? What happens if you keep pushing a message and strategy that isn't working? Right? It's relationship fatigue, diminished credibility, loss of influence. So you want to keep it within that unknown, that covert area, because once you go past that, now you're meeting resistance and you start to get diminished returns. So you got to pivot and you got to evolve your message and the story and keep moving. So the second iteration was working with using modified voices, but from actual guerrilla fighters. They told their war stories, and the target was the lower echelon fighters like Giovanni Andres here, recruited at 17, met a girl. You're not allowed to fall in love though in the FARC. And so they split them apart, sent the girl far away. And it wasn't until later on that the girl actually is like, hey, I know this area, I can escape. She left the camps. And when she left, she met with the Mullen Lowe Group, and they interviewed her. They put her story on the radio with a modified voice. And Giovanni heard her and recognized the story and recognized that that's her, that's my girl. And so it gave him confidence. He heard her story and knew that she left, and it gave him confidence. And so shortly after he left, got the courage to leave as well, and demobilized, and they met back up, and they had a good, so their love story, they met each other, and that worked out. I don't know anything beyond that, but they met up, and that's great. So this part of the campaign, it started to work better, right? Their tweak started to work using actual guerrilla fighters. Now they kind of tweaked a little bit more, because they knew that they were only getting lower echelon fighters with this messaging. So they're like, well, how do we get the commanders? Well, let's use demobilized commanders to talk to commanders. And so now it's commanders recruiting commanders. They put them up in Blackhawks with loudspeakers and said, hey, like, I'm commander such and such from the such and such squadron or whatever. Like, I left, you can too. And so that actually helped. They demobilized some leaders, and that had a little bit greater effect with the upper echelons. Second iteration, though, so since those ads were on the air, those radio spots with real guerrilla fighters, 2,000 people demobilized, but it wasn't enough. The FARC leaders started to counteract this. So, your competition is going to counteract your messaging. And so the commanders were saying that, hey, the government's just trying to force you to cooperate. They're actually trying to manipulate you. If you cooperate with them, will kill you if you leave, right? So they counteracted their messaging. You'll find that happens. And so again, you've got to evolve and iterate. So they had to look for different target audience analysis, different angles, different stories and dimensions to be able to evolve their message. So this time, we talked about vulnerabilities, that they felt like they were captive as much so as the people they were holding captive. So now we look for a value, a shared value. Christmas. So this third iteration, Operation Christmas, the significance of Christmas was it was a shared value among the people in Colombia. In 2010, they noticed that during Christmas, the percentage of demobilizations would increase dramatically. So December was a vulnerable time for the guerrilla leaders. So they started to look at, how do we use the elements of Christmas, values, the jungle and fighters walking all day to solve this problem? So how do we use values and vulnerabilities to solve this problem? So this iteration, they chose 9 strategic pathways in the jungle and covered 75-foot trees with Christmas lights, with a sign that only lit up when the guerrillas happened to walk by, which triggered a motion sensor. This moved 331 guerrilla fighters to leave the camps. Some didn't even have to see it to believe it, and they left as well. So it looked like this. And if you can imagine a 75-foot tree, you're going through the dark jungle and under the cover of night on these strategic pathways, and you're in your fatigues, you're tired, you're carrying weight on your back, and this trail, this pathway, and all of a sudden something unexpected happens. You hit a motion sensor, and instead of like a bomb, a tree lights up, 75-foot tree during Christmas with Christmas lights. And it has a big sign that lights up, and it says, if Christmas can come to the jungle, you can come home. Demobilize. It's Christmas. Everything is possible.
Wow. I mean, that's
how emotional would that be?
Wow. It's just mind blowing. I mean, the creativity, it's stirring. It's, I've never heard of any story like that, Rusty, until you told me. And it is powerful.
Yeah. I mean, think about like a campaign, a branding initiative or a marketing campaign. Think about looking for a big idea that includes values and vulnerabilities in a way that resonates and moves people at a visceral level. Mm-hmm. Like the value here is Christmas, and everyone wanting to be home at Christmas and be together. And then the vulnerability is, we feel like captives. We want to get out of here. So it's all in that one phrase. If Christmas can come to where you're captured, the jungle, you can come home. At Christmas, brilliant. Everything's possible.
It's just brilliant. And I would venture to say, I bet that a lot of the folks, you guys that are listening to this, probably never heard this story. But I mean, when I first heard it, I was just blown away. And I thought, man, like, could you imagine having a marketing message to a client or an audience that that evoked that level of emotion, that the answer became obvious. I mean, it just became obvious, and it became the right thing to do. And they were doing this beyond, obviously they weren't even thinking about the job at the time. They were thinking about that this is the right thing to do. And the other part of this is that, the people behind the message, our government, right, was doing this with well intentions, knowing full well that we could go in there and cause all kinds of military problems if we wanted to. But instead, we did this, which is to get them to make a more logical decision. Really, really smart how you can tie psychology and visual communication and all these pieces together to create a better outcome.
For sure. Yeah, I love it. It's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah,
I've told it a million times, but it's like I can't tell it enough because it's such a perfect example of campaign management in a way that's like not typically done in the business world, right?
Yeah.
Using values and vulnerabilities and pivoting and evolving across the span of, like, it didn't just happen overnight. Like they started with radio spots with actors. That didn't work. So then went to radio spots with the real ones. That started to work. And then they targeted different audiences with lower echelon, upper echelon. And then they really, once they got beyond like typical demographics, they moved into the psychographics of vulnerabilities and values. That's when they started to reach resonance, what I call messaging resonance, where you get like that perfect tonality that just like explodes in the minds and hearts of the people you're trying to reach.
Yeah, I would think, I mean, you've got my brain going. I'm thinking about what's the next campaign we do together. Like, I mean, geez, supply chain risk is one thing, but how could we take it even to the further level? But yeah, this is brilliant, and that's the thing. This is a trained and learned skill set, right? Like this is transferable knowledge. Am I right that you can like basically train people to do this, business leaders to have the same kind of outcome?
For sure. Yeah, no, we're actually coming up. We're coming up with and developing a certification program called Unconventional Influence. It's certification in using some of these models of covert control, using even like digging into some manufacturing terminology and models like theory of constraints to be able to plan this objective, subjective, and supporting objective type framework for planning campaigns and for coaching even. So we're coming up with that for other coaches and experts that really want to master this stuff, because you can't try it. It takes a level of mastery. Like, for example, for us, they taught us, and we're looking at different ways to develop this. But for me, like when I went through the PSYOP pipeline at the Special Warfare College there, like we would get smoked all day with like super hard physical stuff, like the stuff you see on TV. And then at night we'd have to wake up and write essays, and not to get any more in depth, but we'd have to be convincing and convince somebody of a position that we may or may not have even believed in, and do it when we're tired. And so it's like this requires a level of understanding to where you get to dive into the psyche and the understanding of the other person, like to a level that like you see through their eyes.
It's fascinating because it's like people think, first of all, just most people think of the military and they think of guns and they think of bombs and they think of war. And what you're describing is, I mean, you're describing a level of rigor, of like a boot camp level of rigor, but at the same time, your output is marketing and influence. It's fascinating, right? I mean,
I
literally marketing and influence and campaign management and those aspects. And there's such a huge crossover in business, even when you think of branding. Like, think about emotion and what different brands, through your past or through history have kind of meant to you. So for instance, like I'll give you an example. Kodak, Kodak, anytime you think of Kodak, you think of memories, right? Memories of the old pictures when you were kids, your family, all that kind of stuff. But you actually don't think about necessarily what their logo was. Maybe you do. You kind of project that, but in reality, your first thing comes to mind is like, oh, I have an old Kodak, I have a whole bunch of Kodaks with all these memories on it. Immediately thinking of memories, and that association to a good feeling, I guess you could say, is what a lot of brands aspire to do, is to create an association of a more positive outcome. And there's a way to do that with this approach that you're describing. It's completely unconventional. Most people have, including myself, I have never met anybody that knows this to your level. And I think in the business world, the translation of it's massive. So now it's up to, I guess now Rusty, the question is how to scale, right? So we get more folks to know about kind of the art of the possible on this approach.
Yeah. The art of the possible is that's where it gets exciting, and the work I've done, and you and I did some of this work on other projects, the business of cyber, and done this with other clients one-on-one as I've worked to transition out of the military, out of special operations and back into the business world. But it is exciting, and it's, sky's the limit as far as like what we can do to really reframe marketing and influence in a way that is understood at a larger and deeper level. Like, so instead of like the latest tactic and technique of the day, you look at it as a campaign. And instead of just planning out like our communication strategy, like, so we're going to promote this product here, this product there. Like, no, like let's focus our campaign and pivots on real time, how the audience is responding to the big ideas and the belief chains that we're using, and the stories, and their behavior and actions towards those. Are they engaging with it, and at what level, and what feedback? So it's constant feedback, right? Like asking them, talking to them. That's the only way that the Mullen-Lowe group, that they're able to get this feedback, was constantly being obsessed with interviewing demobilized fighters and finding out like what their feelings were, how they thought, how they felt, that why they left, why they stayed, what they did, they, like just really being obsessed with the level of understanding of what they were trying to do. And in fact, if it's okay, I'll go a little bit further here with this campaign, because it didn't stop here. They found a new angle. They discovered Operation Rivers of Light. They discovered that field trips were conducted, and they discovered a new element, rivers. They don't walk as much as everyone thought. The rivers are the highways of the jungle. So over 6,000 messages, toys, trinkets, and notes were gathered from towns that used to be ruled by the FARC. And they put them in these little plastic balls and put them in the rivers where the FARC was actually traveling. Yeah. The president at the time even got into this, and they were putting these into the rivers. And it was a massive media ordeal that they televised. And at night it looked like that. Pretty cool.
Wow, that's fascinating. So these lit up, and I suspect it would inspire. I mean, it depends on like how would they receive this?
So again, you're the guerrilla lower echelon fighter, or you're just the guerrilla fighter, and you're like feeling trapped in the jungle and on your way to your next like operation where you got to go do some bad stuff, go kidnap some people. And you're like, man, I feel trapped. And then all of a sudden you've been hearing that people have been leaving because of these lit up Christmas trees. And the other fear here is not only that can I leave, it's also, will society accept me back in? That's the other side of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, value vulnerability. Value is family, Christmas, this time of year. Vulnerability is, now will my family accept me back? And so these little balls had messages and trinkets reminding them of home, and they were from the people of the communities they used to rule, saying, hey, come back, it's Christmas, anything can happen. And so in essence, they were getting the approval and okay of the people to go back, that they would accept them back, even though they had done these terrible things. And that's kind of what this started to reveal to the guerrilla fighters. So all of a sudden now you're not so afraid to leave, you can go back, and that you're starting to think that they'll accept you back.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant.
So again, it generated on average demobilization every 6 hours, but they kept going. This time the Operation Bethlehem, a new tweak. So the next Christmas, they wanted to not only bring lights to the jungle, but they also wanted to lead them out of it. They placed huge spotlights in the sky, attempting to symbolize a freedom spot. They were still very dangerous, though, going out of these strategic pathways. The guerrillas realized that those areas were key spot, and so they started to guard them. So they looked for alternative spots to be able to lead these guerrillas out of the jungle. And they messaged to them, guerrilla, this Christmas, follow the light that will guide you to your family and your freedom.
Wow.
Again, it's not talking to a soldier. It's not talking to a lower echelon fighter or a commander. There's no demographics here. It's just, hey, you guerrilla, like, come home to your family and your freedom, right? Different level.
Yeah, it's next level for sure. I mean, it's so, when I think of this, it's, well, a lot of thoughts come to my mind, but like in the business world, when you're out there, I mean, I've worked for big companies and small companies, startups, and so on and so forth. Obviously I have a startup called Measured Risk. But that being said, this reminds you of the statement, like, you can lead a horse to water, right? Like the phrase everybody uses. But this is literally like a perfect example of leading the horse to water, and leading, and getting people to a better outcome. We all try to do it in business. We're all in business, not just to make money. I mean, I think the people that just are in business to make money fail invariably. That's just a part of it. If that's your full intentions, I think you miss the mark, so to speak. And so I think
I don't think you'll last. I don't think you'll last as an entrepreneur.
No. Yeah, you fail, and
over the long run,
Yeah, definitely. And I can't imagine the life of being focused on just that either. So, but what I think that the thing is that most people that are, business leaders that are serious, that I've worked with through the years, they're really actually trying to figure out a way to help their customers really solve these problems. I mean, you've heard of like customer success organizations being stood up in the last decade or so. It used to be customer service. Now it's customer success, right? The truth is the more intimate we can get with our customers, the better relationship we can have, the more we can understand the pains and the challenges that they face. And hopefully we can build ways and pathways and solutions that alleviate some of that burden, make their jobs and lives easier. Everybody I know in business, for the most part, everybody I know, that's what their objectives are. And what you're describing, though, is a very unique way to kind of look at that from a different perspective, and maybe an architect that either messaging or campaign or approach or methodology that people. I mean, I have a lot of friends that are former special forces or military or intelligence and so on and so forth. You don't get to hear typically these types of you're really, like, what you're doing is you're showing us a glimpse here of the art of the possible, which is awesome. I think it's going to open a lot of people's eyes about how could we then apply that same kind of approach that we're actually trying to help our clients, and do that in a way that shows them a path that is more successful. Ultimately, that's the desire, right? The desired outcome.
Really Smart. Is. And you're right. And I love that we can connect with people that want to make the difference you're talking about, that really care about client and customer customer success, not just service, but the success. And
Yeah.
and like, can we lead them out of the jungles of their current situations into their desired destinations through our services, through our products, and through our expertise? That's the question, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're spot on the money. So you've got like a wild wealth of knowledge in this area. I mean, I would think I would think that a couple different thoughts. Um, some areas it's not just the customer too. It's not just customer acquisition or customer success, but it's also in an organization. If you go to, for instance, if you go to any of these large companies and you know a lot of them will have big corporate events, and those corporate events are like sales kickoffs. They all go SKOs, they're called, right? Um, and what you're really trying to do is get the sales organization and the marketing folks and get the whole organization aligned around a common vision and a mission, and get the kind of value system re-entrenched and in a forward path. I think that what you just walk through is just as useful internally into an organization as well.
For sure, because the employees that work for any company are drawn to the vision, mission, purpose, and story of that company, right?
Mhm.
And so that founder story, or the company's founding story, tends to draw and retain, or not, the talent that's there. And so the idea here is to really get clear on that story and be able to internally build out that same type of campaign to recruit and draw in the right type of talent, and be able to filter out the wrong ones.
Mm-hmm. How are you, like, when you develop one of these campaigns, and I guess you're sitting and whiteboarding, or you're in a room full of people, and like kind of what I consider a discovery session, or like a day, like basically a workshop type of situation. I mean, in some ways, there's a lot of ideation that happens, and you're going methodically through the process. I suspect you've got like your own process. I mean, I've worked with you. I know I've watched what you can do on the email marketing messaging campaign side. Like, that was just one little glimmer, which, by the way, just so you know, I mean, that for you folks listening, during COVID, Rusty and I worked on I built basically a course to help people get into the cybersecurity industry from a non-traditional approach, from a non-technical background, but because we need folks in cybersecurity, and we need not just network engineers, or just what I consider ethical hackers. We actually need people that are on the business side and understand risk and cross into that. And so we built this course during COVID, and I enlisted the help of Rusty to get this course out to the market. And by the way, I mean, as a result of doing that, there are people that have taken that course have changed their lives completely, and are now in the cybersecurity industry. Some of them are directors in cybersecurity companies. It's amazing. So it works.
Awesome.
Yeah. So just that's,
Yeah.
I mean, I can actually say firsthand that it works. It really, really cool. And that was just one application of, how to take what and put it into this area of focus. So when you think of this, when you think of the podcast, what's your plan? Like, what's your, when we're talking about the plan with the podcast, what's your vision for what you hope people to get out of it? And then when you think about, obviously we're going to be looking for different folks to come on it. What areas do you find interesting that would expand this kind of value? I mean, this has already got to be mind blowing to some people, but this is to me.
Yeah, no, the vision here, I think, moving forward, is for me and you to flesh out kind of our own methodologies here within the cyber and the human realms.
Yep.
There's a lot of overlap there. I'm excited to dig into, but also, like, there's, with unconventional influence, the way that I teach and train it encompasses not just marketing. it encompasses influence at the levels of self, team, and campaign.
Uh-huh.
And so the idea moving forward is to be able to bring on folks that are subject matter experts in self-influence and being able to optimize your own psychology, physiology at the at that clandestine level to really optimize the self and to move into face-to-face communication. So optimizing the self and then moving into enlisting others and then scaling that to a small to a medium-sized team, being able to develop that team and regulate, communicate, and RFO, I call it, relentlessly focus on the objective as a team to be able to move into that next scale of now campaign. And how do we manage that campaign with the same regulate, communicate, relentless focus on the objective. So self, team, and campaign regulation, communication, and objective completion. We're going to find people that are going to take us to new levels in every one of those areas. And I think that's going to take us long enough. And that's going to, there's so many people I think that I'm excited to talk to that can help us get deep on those areas. But I think that's infinitely valuable to our audience to be able to understand, how to optimize self, develop a team, and manage a campaign.
Yeah. I mean, it makes, and then when I think of small teams, obviously all the time. You come from a small team environment. I think even having, I think it would be really cool to have a session on your thoughts around the small team environment and how is it, I really did dissect how such small teams create amazing results that then can be translated to business. I think your background in articulating that would be really unique, and experience in doing that would be a cool one. And then I was thinking that artificial intelligence, believe it or not, I want to talk in the future about the application of artificial intelligence and some of the innovation that's happening there to, I guess you could say, how artificial intelligence will be used and is used. I mean, they're already using generative adversarial networks to do misinformation campaigns, for instance. So actually, when you think about target analysis, target audience analysis, and things like that, I mean, you're seeing at scale deep fakes and all kinds of things. And then obviously with some of the new tools that are out that everybody's playing around with, you can have it write anything, right? And so we're going to see more of that. I think it'd be pretty cool to dive into that a bit as well in a future session.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think that stuff can replicate what a human brain can do to dive into the vulnerabilities and values of a population that is, I don't know. I think there's something to be said about that skill set. And then you can use those tools to really canonize or flesh out those ideas to help you, because you got to know the right questions to ask, right?
That's right.
And so without the right questions without the right questions, you're not going to get garbage in, garbage out. So
yeah, man,
we'll dig into that. I'm excited to get into that.
That's going to be a good one too, because I think everybody's so kind of, hey, this is the holy grail of marketing, the latest. But the reality is that it goes back to, is AI going to replace humans? Now, you're absolutely not. To your point, it doesn't know how to ask the right questions. And so there's a lot to that. I think that, but there is uses of artificial intelligence to further advance a campaign and to further advance messaging and things like that as well. So yeah, we definitely will have to talk about that. All right. Well, I know we're running on time.
And you're just so the audience knows, like you're my guest on this one, but you're a co-host moving forward. So we're gonna do this together. It's gonna be fun. So they're gonna be able to get to know Tommy a lot better, Mr. Tom Albert. And I know they can find you at measuredrisk.com. Is that right?
Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn. It's just LinkedIn//Tom Albert, or Measured Risk is my company. Yeah. Yep.
And you're launching a new SaaS product.
Yeah, we have really spent years as an entrepreneur just building some really advanced AI capabilities and data science, specifically around the problem of how do you characterize the risk within a supply chain without having, it's not like you own or have custody of the supply chain as an organization, and you don't have people necessarily in the supply chain or other organizations. How do you actually characterize the risk of these entities that comprise your supply chain? And for big companies have 20 to 40,000 suppliers. Department of Defense has like 350,000 suppliers. And so how do you manage and identify the risk on a continuous basis of these suppliers so that you have clarity? And the reason it's really important, well, obviously it's really important. Everybody knows what happened during COVID. When the supply chain doesn't work, big problems happen. That was like a massive lesson. But more kind of focused, I guess you could say, is anytime we build anything in the world that's important, whether it's a jet, a fighter jet, whether it's a vaccine, whether it's an automobile, whatever it may be, the composition of that requires coordination, and it requires thousands of different parties to participate. And so you have inherently a dependency risk with every component that goes into making things in this world. There's more complexity. So knowing the risk of those suppliers either going out of business or whether they're going to be breached or hacked, those are really, really important things. And we make technology. We make a software application that uses neural nets and has kind of I won't get technical, but has some really, really, really advanced capabilities to very quickly be able to disambiguate with the risk of every individual entity that composes that supply chain. We have a capability that can target and determine very quickly and provide intelligence about the risk of that supplier to that ongoing project or that mission or that objective. And so, we're launching that as we speak, and we're super excited about it. Yeah.
So pumped about that. I know that's been a work in progress, and I'm so excited for the launch of it. It's going to be massive. COVID was a massive indicator that we need this now, not just in massive companies, but in any company that produces a physical product, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be big. So want to wrap it up. I'm super excited and glad everyone's able to make it to the episode 001 of Covert Control, where we train and coach on full spectrum influence and how to really master those skills in your life, business, and in campaigns, right? And everything you do. So signing out, this is Russ and
Tom. Thank you guys.
We'll see you next time. Take care.
See you next time.